fifth presentation here at Lone Star Park. We're sloppy. We're off the turf. It's the day after the Kentucky Derby. What a derby it was. I'm Jim Byers alongside Rick Lee, track handicapper and line maker. Rick, because we had 11 races yesterday, we can only touch on the Derby here, but boy, it was quite a rendition of the race. Keith Asmussen was in the race. Boy, his horse looked like he stopped like an absolute he stopped to a walk. Steve had a horse in the race, Asmussen. There was that great story of that trainer Demerit that was in there, but boy, at the end, Brian Hernandez Jr. and Kenny McPeak, kind of a win for the Midwest.
Yes, yeah, they had a tremendous Oaklawn, and that horse had run a tremendous race in Hot Springs in the Southwest, running a 101 buyer, which always puts you in the chase. I do know the official number came back 100 in the Derby yesterday, which for Derby, slightly lower than normal, but that was a heck of a finish. I felt like if the Japanese horse wasn't hitting left-handed and pushing Sierra Leone out, just since the margin of victory was that much, it may have cost him, but, it was great race riding all the way around, and, oh, man, it's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, quite a story.
It was a great race.
It was. Quite a story, too, with those two Japanese horses, the one in particular that was right there at the end. I mean, one of these days we might see a Japanese Derby winner.
Yeah, they're winning everything else, Breeders' Cups and Dubai World Cups, and they're winning everything. So, yeah, it's just a matter of time.
So we are sloppy and off the turf. Let's get on to our selections and analysis of today's races. I think the first race is kind of formulaic. I went straight with the morning line, which I really don't like to do. I see we both like Mr. Shorty in the first. Are you still on Mr. Shorty with the track condition change?
Yeah, that doesn't concern me all that much. His fastest speed figure came on a muddy track at Delta, and that was at 5/8 of a mile, the exact same distance as today. He has the benefit of a race over the track, and that 5.5 furlong races, I know he caved in late, but he went 21-3. And at 5.5 furlongs, that first quarter does have a little bit of the turn in it. So that's an exceptional speed. Now, there are other horses that are tough to beat to the lead in here. That's why I'm also glad at Delta Downs. This horse was beaten less than 2 lengths while being beat to the lead. So I think Mr. Shorty's the one to beat with a race over the track and a big drop in class.
Yeah, you see that fast work on April 13th, and Broberg's barn seems to be working the horses a little more aggressively, at least in terms of number of works than I recall in past seasons. I don't know if it's a change in philosophy or just the way, horses are that he has. This horse ripped off that fast 5/8 on April 13th, came out and just tried to run away from that maiden special field. I think shortening up to 5 will help. I just don't know if anybody can really go with him if he's on his game. He probably needed an out. I mean, he hadn't been out since January. So I'm on his bandwagon as well. Impoverished, second off the layoff. You got to watch that. He shortens a furlong, which will probably help because staying power does not seem to be his stock and trade. We'll see what happens.
I don't want to not mention Tooth Man because he's dropping also from maiden special weights all the way down to the bottom. Will Rogers' horses have fared well so far, and this horse went 44-4 for a half, and I know he got beat by 11, but that race was a full furlong further than this race. So if he can beat Mr. Shorty to the lead, I mean, who knows? There is a wet track to deal with here too, so. I think it'll be a pretty competitive race.
Yeah. It's the first but not the only time that Broberg and Asmussen will have top contenders in here. And you bring up a good point about Will Rogers as far as the horses coming from there have been pretty competitive. And there's one coming up later that you like that's out of the Wilma Mankiller Stakes. And some of their stakes horses have come up pretty big here so far. Race 2 is a really good race. I think it's one of the better races on the card. I'm going off the board a little bit here in race 2 with a pick, but these are 3- and 4-year-old maidens, maiden special weights at 1 mile.
Yeah, I made the odds pretty close on most of them in here, and I went with the horse that I made, I think, the third pick, Young Pope, for Ray Ashford, who last time out finished third in a stake race at Sunland. That race, it's worth noting that the winner was 1-9. So I had to look that up. 1-9. So,
That's a heavy
obviously
favorite.
that horse laid over the field, and I think that horse went to the front too. So he was laying pretty close. Young Pope to a heavily favored winner, finishing third. Now back in a maiden special weight, cutting back slightly in distance, and in a race, just full of question marks, and buyer figures don't do you much good, because all of these horses seem like they want to run around to 60 approximately. So this is a really tough race, but I'm just assuming Ray Ashford's connections, having coming out of a stake, they must think something of him, and so I'll take him in a maiden race.
One thing that's interesting about young Pope is he was on Lasix those first two races. He comes off Lasix for the Mind That Bird, and then I guess they're going to keep him off Lasix today, at least according to my past performances. It doesn't affect how I like him. I think he has about as good a chance as any to win this race. I just think it's interesting. I went with Bishop Creek, and I went and watched this race. His debut, he was 19-1 at Houston, and it was an off-the-turf affair. He just walked out of the gate. He was out last, and he stayed wide all the way around. I'd love to see the distance tracker, like I think they have in New York, to see how much farther he ran than, let's say, the winner in that race, Last Attack. It was substantial. I mean, he was stuck wide even when he didn't have to be. He was super wide coming for home. He switches to Jose Alvarez, who's a really, really good rider. I think that's a pivotal jockey switch. Has a really good half-mile breeze coming into this on April 30th. I think he's going to be a little quicker out of there today. At least I hope he is. So I'm going to take Bishop Creek. A whole bunch of horses have big chances in here. I almost picked Ringside. I think he's got a shot. It just worries me that he has stopped to a walk a couple of times on the dirt. But, his Ringside, if you go back a year, was running mid-70s or low 70s numbers at Tampa on the dirt.
Yeah, and Macho Grande finished in front of your pick at Houston, but had a much better trip. So that might be a wise choice. And Patriot Hills, who neither of us picked, that I made the favorite in here, just good speed coming out of Oaklawn for Diodoro. So I know money will go his direction.
Yeah, and a very high Tomlinson wet track number if you put your stock in those. Race 3, off the turf, no show, no superfecta wagers on this race. Scratch the 1 low profile, scratch the 4 charming Leah, scratch the 5 Collins Julie, the 7 Platinum Phantom, and the 9 Palacinta 1 mile main track.
Yeah, now how are you pronouncing the 3 horse?
Utsira,
yeah. Made the score 6-5 for turf, but may not be 6-5 on main track. I'm not sure. I'm sticking with this 4-year-old filly, basically based on the 2 races, one at Remington, one at Houston. But that muddy track 1 mile race at Houston and a maiden special weight, obviously, is something to look at, considering we have a wet track and we're going 1 mile today. Finished second. The winner, Viewers Discretion, has not been beaten since that race. Has reeled off 3 straight wins for Sean Davis. So the horse is in good form of the filly, good tactical route speed, and just based on that muddy track mile race at Houston, I'm going to give her a chance today.
I tried to beat her last time with the filly that ran third in that race, Kara, and I don't know what happened to Utsira last time, but she really
gave it up.
Bowed out, caved, as they sometimes say in the, I think it's the Kentucky chart callers like to use the word caved. But she caved very late. I mean, and this is still a mile race, but I even think, some of her off races probably beat this bunch because this is not a very strong field. The other competition, with due respect, don't excite me.
Yeah, the 10 Malibu's Dynamite I thought could be overlooked because people think, beating 15 lengths in her debut. But that was around the bull ring, and the works on 1 mile tracks at Louisiana Downs and Lone Star Park are very fast works. So, and why would Cabrera be aboard a horse that has no chance?
That's true.
So I think that might be the sleeper at probably a decent price. I know we've scratched down to a smaller field, but Malibu's Dynamite, to me, might offer the most value.
Yeah, and we both used her second. On to the 4th. All older fillies and mares in this one. Really good race. I had a hard time picking between the 3 and the 6. Optional $40,000 claimer, or you could be a non-winner of 4. There were 2 that jumped out at me, and I see we went on different horses, but Tiffany Twist had a chance to run at Oaklawn yesterday, and Connection's choosing to run here instead.
Yeah, that was a feature race that Tiffany Twist was entered in, and I had her picked 4th in that very strong allowance race. Opted to scratch and come in here. Really good form coming out of a stake race, beating only 3 lengths at Will Rogers. You got to look, since today's track edition, how has she fared on a wet track at Remington in the slop in a condition similar to this, was narrowly defeated. And then the other one, you can draw a line through it because, one, that was a route. Secondly, it was a stake, and she actually ran really well. She just didn't want to go that far. She's a proven sprinter. So I think that stake race where, beating 17 lengths, that to me does not tell me she doesn't like a wet track. So that said, Scott Young won 3 races yesterday.
Yeah. Wethy won 4.
Yeah, and sometimes it's good to be hot. Just ask Ken McPeak.
That's right. He was super hot. I lean toward Olivia G. Remember Adrian G? You might remember her. She crossed over into my area here. Adrian G won 11 races for Calhoun, 11 of 33, made $346K, mostly as an allowance-type filly. And she's the mother of this Olivia G, who comes in. I don't believe she's ever faced open company. I mean, my PPs go back to 12 over 14 races. Not sure about the first 2. But stakes-type Louisiana-bred filly. I like the fact that while she doesn't have a high pace number, she puts herself into pretty prominent positions in the race. She's not going to be coming from way out of it. And you just never know on a muddy, sloppy track how it's going to play. Sometimes they can be pretty speed-favoring, but other times, as it starts to dry out, it might not be. She has a versatile style. She's hot. I respect Tiffany Twist a lot. I mean, she's a more logical pick. But then how about Lindy Wade coming back? Lindy gave up riding for a while and then came back. And it's going to be good to see Lindy, assuming he is here. And I have not heard of a jockey change, but it's going to be good to see him.
Yeah, he's probably glad this filly can carry 124 because when guys come back, usually they're a little bit heavier. We do need to mention for people without past performances, Olivia G, your selection did run on a wet track in a stake in November at Fairgrounds and actually ran a terrific race. Beaten 3/4 of a length and Free Like a Girl shipped up to Hot Springs, I remember. So she's a pretty quality filly that beat Olivia G that day.
It's a good. That's a good race. Ranim, I think. I think both Capalucci's have some kind of a chance in there as well. But the top 2 fillies are going to take most of the money, I would think.
I think so.
On to the 5th. Here's another Broberg-Asmussen matchup. 7/8 of a mile, $5,000 beaten claimers, and we both like Shell Shock in here.
Yeah, Broberg's has won 9 times, and Shell Shock is in for the other condition, non-winners of 4. I gave Shell Shock the advantage. 7/8 of a mile, most people believe, is kind of a specialized distance, and Shell Shock, April 26th here at Lone Star Park, defeated that non-winners of 3 field in pretty determined fashion. And you can make a case that this mare likes a wet track more than a fast track. So that said, I'm going with Steve Asmussen, who's off to a terrific start, as usual.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. This race last time was kind of a good example of why Asmussen's barn is so tough, because his horses just always seem to have a little something else for the last 16th to 8th of a mile. In this race, this mare sat outside the pacemaker but was very prominent and then wound up in a length of the stretch head-and-head duel but wound up coming away a little bit at the end. Whoever was challenged, I think it was It's My Money too, got right up to her, and they were between calls or at the furlong pole head-and-head, and Shell Shock just had a little bit more. And as far as Simple Pleasure, she's very comfortable at this level. Wins a lot of races, but, she's kind of forgotten how to win. I'm not sure she's not one of those horses you described once that get old. They get older, and they know they're going to get fed if they just kind of run around there and perform. And I think Sonneman was the first horse we talked about, an old stakes horse that Steve had that just kind of ran around, ran the same race every time. And Simple Pleasure's last win was August of 22 at LAD, and her previous win before that was March of 21 at Sam Houston. So she's starting to space them apart.
Yeah, I don't have to talk too much about an 8 to 5. I just will add one more thing. I like that she drew the 7 post out of 7 last time. Now she's in the 9 post out of 9. I think that's so important when horses, because some horses like to be inside, most don't. All horses seem to relax and run their best race when they're outside of rivals.
Yep. And if you're looking for somebody that might come rolling late or might not get as much money, Basket Case. Looks like one coming off a couple of pretty decent turf tries. Might be one that, if other than the top 2, if you're looking to include someone. On to the 6th. Off the turf, 1 mile on the main track. Scratch the 4, Athena Doro, and scratch the 9, the Next Big Bling. This is a first-level state-bred allowance for Texas fillies.
Yeah, this is a really good race. It was going to be a good race anyway. I picked my best long shot, assuming it was on the turf, but I still think that you could get a price in here. I went with Take My Picture, who I think will be a pretty fair price on the main track here. I think people will focus on one main track race in her career debut and getting beat 27 lengths. That doesn't concern me that much. She was bet down to 11 to 1, and remember that was a 14-horse field. So 11 to 1 in a 14-horse field is different than being 11 to 1 in a 7-horse field. So obviously trained well, took some money, just didn't run well for trainer Shane Wilson there at Houston. Jade Geldner picks up the filly, goes immediately to turf, and runs 2 terrific races. A nice maiden special weight win, and then at this level in April at Houston runs another terrific race, beating only a length and a half. I went back to all of her main track workouts. They always seem to be good. Stuart Elliott's back aboard. Geldner wins at 32% when he uses Stuart. So his overall win percentage of 9%. I mean, he must not win with anyone else, basically. So Stuart gets all of his live horses, and I really think this horse will handle a wet track today.
You know, it's interesting. You used Cross Claim as your long shot on the initial picks. I didn't handicap this race till it came off the turf. And I'm jumping on Cross Claim as it is.
Yeah,
so I'm on your horse.
Yeah.
Take My Picture. You make a good case for. She's one of those where I couldn't quite zero in on. I didn't get a great picture of how she would do. So as Gary West once said, I didn't know what to do with her, so I threw her out. And I don't know if that's necessarily always the best strategy. When I do it, it sometimes bites me. But Cross Claim stretches out, closed a lot of ground here, opening weekend sprinting on the grass, closed a ton of ground late, got to within a neck of She Speaks, stretches out for the first time. It's a really fast April 13th work to get ready for that turf sprint. Matt Hebert wins a lot of races, and Diego sticks with her. And I just think in a field where I don't know if anybody really stands out.
No, they don't.
You know, the original morning line favorite on turf, Gracie's Kitten, technically trained by Mike Maker. Now he has an assistant here looking after her. But, you know, this filly was in Houston running in Texas Stakes. Then she goes to Keeneland and trains for a while.
Yeah.
And then comes back here. But, you know, she's still 1 for 16 with 5 seconds. I don't know.
She can't get her name called. I mean, Gracie's Kitten. I mean, people might bet off the morning line and recent numbers, great connections, but those 4 dirt races are beyond bad. All 4 of them.
And one of them was at Belterra in a 5-horse field.
Yeah, so it's really hard for me to recommend people bet a filly like that one.
I threw her in there third just because Maker's name shows up in the pick.
Yeah, and one thing you didn't mention on your pick is that 6-length win at Lone Star last summer. That's important.
That's true.
So I think there's a lot
handle
going.
The track.
Oh,
even
absolutely.
Though it was a sprint.
Yeah.
Yeah. On we go to the 7th. Race 7, 7/8 of a mile. Non-winners of 2 claimers for a $5,000 tag. Scratch number 7, Kit Her Cat. out of this one.
Yeah, and I'm going with Asmussen in this one. Kentucky Bourbon. Just the class. Finishes second on a sloppy track at Churchill Downs last year in a $30,000 condition claimer. Fast forward to the fall at Churchill in November, a $16,000 race. Remember, this is for $5,000, and finishes second in that spot. The synthetic race was even pretty good at Turfway this winter. Comes back, goes to Louisiana Downs, and don't be, Steve had a lot of Oaklawn winners that wintered at Louisiana Downs. I'm not that concerned. Blew him out 35-1. I think this horse loves the distance, I would say. What is 7/8 of a mile? It looks like, I put the smiley face by distance, even though the horse hasn't run much at it. It's always finishing at 6. That's what I meant by should really like the distance. And Steve's had a lot of success with his youngest son here, Eric. They got a really good win percentage, a little better than when he rides Keith, but Keith's been riding at Oaklawn. It's probably a little easier to put in. It's easier to put Eric on a winner at Houston than put Keith on a winner at Oaklawn.
I think that's probably true. The one thing about this race, it's a non-winners of 2, and you got a bunch of horses in here that seem perfectly comfortable with running second. A lot of contenders in here show a lot of second-place finishes, hence they're still non-2s. Mm-hmm. I'm throwing out the conventions and going with the 4 Iowa Hawkeye.
Hey, there you go.
I did some research today to find out what ELY was. That's the now I knew I'd remember. I forget. White Point County Fair, I think it's called, in Ely, Nevada, which is an eastern Nevada town north of Vegas, but I think way north, like east central Nevada. Literally, it was an old mining town. It was an old stop on the stagecoach routes, the Pony Express. Anyway, they run races there. Now I'm fascinated by that place.
Yeah, Iowa people retire in that state. Maybe that's why.
Maybe. But this horse was second as the favorite at the dreaded Ely meet, so I'm picking him to win here. But I don't know. I'm just trying for a new face. And, I think the horse kind of likes the dirt. And I think he can handle the mile. I don't think that's a problem. I think it's just a matter of and Cappellucci claimed him, and he won a race yesterday, and he's a good trainer. Pretty good first off the claim.
Yep.
Kentucky Bourbon scares me, but he's coming off a layoff, and Steve claimed him for 16, and I guess he's decided, let's see if he can win for 5. Steve does own the horse. He may very well go right out and win. Steve, isn't lapping the trainer standings because he doesn't know what he's doing with these horses. But I'm going to try to beat Kentucky. As far as Northwind goes, he's another one that would just as soon run second, even though his raced a little Frappuccino here was pretty good.
Right.
So, interesting race. I'm going to try a new face. How often do you get to bet a horse that raced at both Wyoming Downs and the White Point County Fair, or whatever it is?
I'm going to say once. You get that chance once, and you're going for it.
Yeah, and who was that? I pick a Minnesota bred, or what was that horse that you said is a Minnesota bred ever won here?
It was Colorado. And you said, quarter horses they do.
Other than quarter horses.
Yeah, because I picked a thoroughbred Colorado. Or you did. I can't remember. One of us did.
I won't do it again, I don't think. On to the 8th. Texas bred maiden special weight fillies at 6.5. This is a good race, too.
Yeah, it's a good race. A benefit of a race over the track for number 10, Blue Bonnet Girl. I like that. As I mentioned earlier, I like an outside post for a sprinter, so I certainly like that. Was beaten only a neck in her debut, so she showed some, very encouraged on that one. Bore in a little bit, but nevertheless, all 3 of her races have actually been good. I like the fact that she has speed. Never been on a wet track. Her wet track, Tomlinson's not very good. I thought, wow, that might be one of the lowest ones I've seen. And then I look up the page, and there was one other one with even Lavender Will. I even had a lower. So whatever that's good for. But anyway, Blue Bonnet Girl to me on paper looks like has a legitimate chance to win. Wet track, apparently on pedigree, it doesn't scream out. She's going to excel on it. So that might be her biggest vulnerability.
She has a lot of credentials. I'm going to go with a filly I picked here on April 20th when we canceled before the races ever started, and that's number 8, Availing. She was in a 6 furlong race that day. I picked her, She didn't get the run. Now she's coming back at 6.5, and I think that's really going to help because she's run basically 2 identical races at Houston. The first was better than the second. The first she made legitimate late bids. The second race, she closed some ground, but it was kind of ho-hum. But since then, she's come out and had a really, really slow work, but I just kind of think that she's going to like the 6.5 furlongs. She might be one that's still trying to break her maiden in the fall, but if not,
maybe not.
I think she might win today. Her wet track number, that when it has an asterisk, it means it's kind of inconclusive. It hasn't had a lot of sample size, but at least it's a little better than Bluebonnet Girl. But Bluebonnet Girl has 3 good races, including one over the track. Bluebonnet Girl might not be the straightest runner. She was disqualified once, but nonetheless, I don't think that's a big issue. But I'm going to try Availing. Just because I picked her last time, I'm going to pick her again. And then you have Taps Mistress for Gellner. Goes turf to either mud or slop. 5 seconds in 7 career starts and 3 seconds in a row.
Yeah.
Doing different things. Routing, sprinting, turfing. So, there you go.
Yeah.
We'll see how
it's going to be a very competitive race.
Last race, 9th. Carryover in the high 5 of $8,151. It's a mile on the main track. Scratch 6, Mr. Snerdley. Scratch the 8, Mr. Insensitive, which helps race callers because whenever you have the same word, the start of 2 names, that can cause problems. Scratch the 9, RR Empire, and the 13, Silent Reason. These are maiden claimers.
Yeah, I think this is a really good race off the turf. I went on with Asmussen's the 12 in form. Just has competed against so much better. I mean, this is a huge drop in class. Was at Fairgrounds and Oaklawn, showed route speed in both of them. Again, now the big drop in class is certainly bred to love a wet track. Has had a couple really good works, including one here at Lone Star Park, 1 minute and 3/5. So I think the horse is doing really good. I'm glad that he's shown speed without making the lead because I'm pretty sure Cisco Kid's making the lead. I got a pretty good pace figure off his race, sprinting at Oaklawn, coming off a sprint to a route, switching Barnes to Diodoro. I just feel like Cisco Kid's going to set the pace. I'm hoping Inform can run similar to what he did against the much better horses he's been competing with and just get a good stalking trip. And in this field, I think his typical number, 55-60, will get it done.
Keep in mind that Inform, my eye caught this, and then I remembered that's a $100,000 maiden claimer. I first thought maybe he dunked him in for $10,000, and I had to count the zeros because you just don't see that many $100,000 maiden claimers.
Right.
So yeah, he's making a significant run. He was a $220,000 colt as a yearling bought by the Winchell Stables. I think Inform makes a lot of sense, even though he only beat 2 horses in 2 races at Oaklawn. But again, you're talking high Oaklawn maidens. Daring Reason, blinkers off, owned by the Norm Hitzges Racing Club. Wouldn't it be cool to see Norm get a win and then hopefully talk about it on the ticket?
Yeah.
Daring Reason in from Gulfstream has never dirted before. I hate to use that word as a verb, but he's never been on dirt. He could run well, but I wound up on a Fairgrounds Invader. Sharp Spark has never dirted either. 2 turf races. The first one was forgettable. The second one, he was okay. I mean, it is Fairgrounds turf racing. Seems to be training well over the main track. He was a $125,000 yearling, so there's some nice colts in here. At least people thought they were. I'm going to try Sharp Spark on the dirt.
Yeah, and Sharp Spark, I like the work tab. I mean, like 4th of 38, 7 of 31, 11 of 58, 32 of 102. So he trains good on the main track. And another thing I like about your pick is Gellner, that's a strong win percentage when he uses Wethy.
Yeah.
And, as a handicapper, you got to use all of it. Not one factor makes you pick a horse, but you like to see a bunch of things add up. And I think with your pick, a lot of things are adding up. Obviously the variable is he's never run on the main track in a race. But, hey, he's not going to be 2-1 either. So
true.
I think he'll have value.
And if you're the buyer expert, If a horse runs a 46 Beyer on turf and today's race is on slop or mud, or even if it were on dry dirt, do you pay much attention to the fact that he's like 10 Beyer points under Daring Reason and in form, or does he kind of different surfaces look at him differently?
Yeah, different surfaces make a big difference. I mean, a 46 on turf is the same as on dirt, but when horses change surfaces, and sometimes when they change distances, even going sprint to route, you know, you can project a much better performance, or sometimes a lesser performance.
Yeah. All right. I think that'll do it. We've got 30 minutes to race 1. 9 races upcoming today. And we'll see how it goes. Off track, no turf. It's always interesting to see how they get across the off surfaces and how it plays. We've got a little array of different picks for you today. So good luck, and we'll do all again
I would
next
definitely
week.
say pay attention to the early races, because if inside speed's doing good, it probably will for most of the card. And if early speed's tiring, especially if they're favorites and late runners are winning, maybe you should start favoring late runners as we go through the program.
Yeah. All right. For Rick Lee, I'm Jim Byers. Thanks a lot for looking in. Good luck this afternoon.